if a person breaks their arm and they come to the hospital, so one of the first things the doctors may have to do is they break the arm again in order to set the arm in a way in which the arm will be healing properly. So you might come and say, well, I just broke my arm. You're going to break my arm again? Are you crazy? And so it's the best way to fix your arm. So that's how we look at hell. Hell is something, nobody stays in hell unless they're really bad. Nobody stays there. But everybody who goes through there understands that they're not being punished. Hell is not punishment. Hell is healing. It's a place where the work that we did not do in this world, we have a chance for it to fix us. There's one thing that can make you excel more than anything else, and that is how much Torah you know. It doesn't matter if you wear a big fur hat and you live in Belgium. It doesn't matter if you wear a bathing suit and you live in Miami. It doesn't matter if you wear super cool clothes and you live on Kibbutz Avraham. It doesn't matter. What really matters is the minute you open your mouth, what do people hear? When you talk, what energy are you bringing down into yourself? All you need to do is invest time. You need to take time. And instead of maybe watching a movie, instead of watching a TV show, instead of watching photographs of what Hollywood women looked like 60 years ago and what they look like today, forget all of that. Believe me, when you go upstairs, they won't ask you about that. But you have the ability to be able to become super powerful through wisdom. It's right here before you. So this story is, King Solomon was a very close friend with the angel of death. And one day he comes and he sees the angel of death is very sad. So he says to the angel of death, he says, why are you so sad? And the angel says, well, I have a real problem. My problem is that I am supposed to kill 2 brothers today, but I don't know how to get them to the place where they need to die. They can't just die today. They have to die in a very specific place. So King Solomon said, well, I feel bad for you. Nothing I can do. And then when he heard the name of the 2 people, King Solomon ran to the 2 brothers and he said, listen, you're in real trouble. The angel of death just told me he's coming for you today. You gotta go and you have to run to a city that is known as Luz, L-U-Z. The city of Luz is a city where people never died. And there are many stories about this city. So he said to them, if you can get to that city, then you'll be safe, because the angel of death has no ability to be able to come into the city of Luz. So they ran. Next day, King Solomon sees the angel of death, and he's very happy. So the king says, why are you so happy? He says, you won't believe what happened. Remember those 2 brothers I told you about that they had to die? Well, the place that they had to die was at the entrance to the city of Luz. And I had no idea how to get them there. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, they're running to the very spot I had to take them up. Okay, so these are stories in the Talmud. They begin as interesting stories, but as you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, you will become a different person. If you look at Carmelo and the little baby sitting there, not so little, on his lap, we all look like that at one point in time. Okay? But now look what happened. Look at Carmelo. Look at his other son. Look at, what happens. You don't stay like the little baby. You grow. Your body grows. What about your soul? The body is going to go back into the earth. I promise you. Nobody gets out of here alive. Nobody. So therefore, what does that teach you? to get really comfortable here? To steal another person's money because that way you'll become richer? To lie to another person so that way you'll be more clever? To hit another person who is also created by God? You know, that's the one thing about the fact that everyone dies. Up in heaven, when the angels look down and say, oh, look at this guy, he just hit that guy. Come on, God, what are you going to do? God says, I'm in a rush. I'm in a rush. That guy's going to die. He's going to come up here. I'll deal with him. You can't get away. Where are you going to go? Where can you go? Where can you go to avoid standing in front of God after this life? Where can you go? You can't. So do you want to stand there with your knees going, right? I mean, again, let's come back to American sports. Or maybe I'm spending too much time on American sports. But let's, you know, if you watch in the NFL, National Football League, when they come on the field, they make a long line of all the players. And the next guy comes out and he runs and he's slapping high five on all the players. It's a team thing. Okay, that's cool. But could you imagine you come upstairs and they go, oh, wow, it's Avram. It's Avram from Kibbutz Avram. And all of a sudden, all the angels are lining up and Avram's going, yo, 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 right? I mean, wouldn't that be an exciting way to come up to the next world? Right? That'd be amazing. What? It's Avram? What? Angels flying in from other planets just to see who this Avram guy is? The one who built a kibbutz in Negua? Wow! The one who cared so much about his community and watched out for them and made sure they were okay and even made sure they had teachers and Torah and did all that he could for them? Wow! Okay? Guess what? Heaven is infinite. There's plenty of room for all of us to also go upstairs like Abraham after 120 years. No rush, no rush. Take your time, right? So what are we doing about it? What are we doing? Maybe we're making money. Maybe we're not. Maybe we're losing money more than likely, right? Maybe it's hot. Maybe it's cold. Maybe there's a war in Ukraine today and then there'll be a war somewhere else tomorrow. Okay, fine, whatever. But what about you? Because at the end of the day, you are the only one God is going to want to talk to you about. God's not going to ask you, hey, what do you think of Putin and Biden? He's not going to ask you that. He's not going to care. He's going to say, hey, you know what? I gave you 100 years of life. What did you do with it? What did you do with it? If I ask your friends about you, what are they going to say to me? What are they going to say behind your back? You know, there's a very interesting story in the Talmud. Talmud says, Gemara says, if somebody calls you a donkey, ignore them. But if two people call you a donkey, go out and buy a saddle. Meaning that you can learn a lot about yourself by what your friends say about you. You know, when you walk into a room, do people smile or do people get nervous? Why? Just think about what you can do. You know, since Carmelo named the community their Knesset Baal Shem Tov, so I will tell you a story from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov said, when I was a 20-year-old man, I was going to go out and change the world. I was going to make the world a better place, and nobody was going to step in my way. Well, by the time I was 30, I thought, okay, the world's a little heavy here, man. I'm going to skip on the world part. The world's a little heavy. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my country. I'm going to make Uganda the best country in the world. People aren't going to want to go to the Emirates. They're going to want to go to Uganda because Uganda is absolutely the coolest of the cool. Well, by the time I was 40, I don't know if I can handle my whole country. Maybe I'll just see what I can do in Negua, make it a better place for the world. By the time I was 50, well, maybe I'll just see what I can do with my community. By the time I'm 60, well, maybe let me see what I can do with my family. By the time I'm 70, gee, what can I do about myself? So what happens is you do nothing. You have these big, giant dreams, but at the end of the day, there's nothing. You're going to start working on yourself at 70? Good luck with that. Working on yourself is the most difficult thing you could ever do. So the Baal Shem Tov said you got to flip it the other way. When you're a 20-year-old young man or young woman, you have all that power, build yourself. Build yourself. It's not called being selfish. It's called being who you are. Build yourself. Because then, if you build yourself when you're 20, then when you're 30, you'll be able to really build with your wife or with your husband and your children, because raising children, as we all know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's love, and you're thankful for it, but it's a lot of work. So when you're 30, you still have that energy. And guess what happens? Guess what happens when you're now 40? Well, people look at that family and say, wow, look at that family. We should be like them. So now all of a sudden, your impact is in your community. And then people talk about your community. Well, wow, you live in that community? That's a wonderful place to live. I hear such great things about the people there. And then by the time you're 50, your communities will change the state you're in. And the state, maybe by the time you're 70, you will be a statesman and you will be able to impact the whole world. You got to turn it around the other way. There's a joke about this, which I don't know if it's a joke, but it's a cute story. Us stupid Americans, we don't really know much about a thing called geography. If you ask most Americans, where is Nigeria, they'll tell you it's on the border of China. Because, you know, who knows geography in America? So this one teacher had these little 8-year-old kids, and she knew they didn't know geography, so she gave all the kids like this little blank piece of paper, and she said to them, I want you to draw a picture, excuse me. She gave them a picture of the world. And she says, I want you to cut it up, and I want you to put all of the countries and continents back together in the correct order. She knew that this would take the kids an hour to do. After 5 minutes, one kid who she didn't think was so smart comes up and hands it to her perfect. Perfect. And so she says to this kid, how did you do this? So the kid said, well, before I cut it up, I turned the paper over. And on the other side of the paper, I drew a picture of myself. And then I cut it up. Because once I saw I could put myself together, then I knew I was putting the whole world together. So the irony is, it's not about going out and changing the world, which is something we may never do. And I'm not so sure God needs us to do that. But it's about going inside and changing yourself. Because a little light can get rid of a lot of darkness. And darkness can be in our mental state. Darkness can be in our heart. Darkness can be in our soul. These are places where darkness is because we have darkness in our lives. But a little candle can start to push a lot of darkness out the window. And as those candles and candles and candles get bigger, the light becomes so much bigger that once you fill yourself with holy light, you will hate darkness. You won't want to have that in you. It'll be like eating poison because you will have converted your body into a holy temple. It's an amazing thing. You know, the Torah teaches us that women have a greater portion in the world to come than men. That's pretty interesting. And why is that? So one reason is because women have much harder lives than men. You know, yes, I'm a man, and I know how hard it is to be a man. You got to go out there, you got to fight with the other men, you got to whatever, you got to make money, ba ba ba, boo boo boo. But just try having a little human being grow inside of you for 9 months. Just imagine that, right? Just imagine all of a sudden, whoop, there's a little person inside of you, and whoop, 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 whoop. Suddenly, There's this little person who's growing up inside of you. Now, think about it from God's perspective. God looked down and saw there's a man and there's a woman. God said, you know what? I trust my babies with the woman, not with a man. I know that she will do all she can to bring this little person into the world and will care about that person and will make that little person grow and become somebody that's really, really special. What do we do as men? When we're men, we grab these little babies when they're now 19, 20, and 21 years old, and we put a gun in their hands, and we say, okay, here, this is our cause. This is what we believe in. Go out and kill those other people who don't think like us. And so these 21, 20-year-old kids think they're doing something great, and they go out with a gun, and bam, they get killed. This mommy raised this baby for 22 years, but men get him killed in one day. So shouldn't women certainly have a greater portion in the world to come? I would say so. That's what the Talmud says. That's what the Torah says. So these are things that if we begin to realize, the key is one simple factor. Our sages tell us that a person should, I hate this word because it sounds very Christian, but you use it anyhow, and that is the word repent. In Judaism, you know, we don't call it that. We call it tshuva. Tshuva means to return. So how does return mean to repent? It's very simple. Where are you returning to? You are returning back to your image of God that you are created in. That's where you are returning to. Because when a Gemara Nida says that when a baby is inside of its mommy, an angel learns the entire Torah with this baby. The angel puts a little candle on the forehead of the baby so that so that the baby can see from one end of creation to the other. But then at the moment the baby is born, the baby forgets all of it. And now the whole process is to rediscover what happened inside the mother's stomach. Meaning what? It's about returning to that place of purity. Being inside the mommy's tummy is like being inside the mikveh. And being inside the mikveh is a place where there is nothing impure. And being inside the mommy with the angel teaching me all the Torah is the highest level of wisdom we will ever have in this world. But now we have the opportunity to return, because the only time that we ever do anything which is wrong is when we forgot where we are coming from. Suddenly we think, well, maybe I'm God. Maybe I'm going to make the decisions of what goes on around here. Maybe I'm going to decide this or I'm going to decide that. It's only because we lose perspective that God, Hashem, is with us 24 hours every single day. And therefore, let me ask you another question. Sometimes people say, you know, hey, that guy, he is so far away from God. That person's really, really far from God. So the question is, how far can a person be from God? If God is everywhere, how can you be far from God? Where? Over here? No. Over here? No. Over there? Also not. Where can you go to be far from God? The answer? Here. That's the only place. Here. Just here. Because you cannot be physically far from God, but you can be blocked in the brain from God. That's a wonderful thing. Why is that wonderful? I'll give you an example. I've never been to Nigeria. I'd like to be. And I also never even been to Uganda, but I have been to Kenya. So that was pretty cool. Although the Maasai are kind of weird, but otherwise it was pretty cool. So anyhow, I'll tell you like this. I'm out in, I don't know, in Mombasa, and I go for a walk along the beach. And all of a sudden I'm lost. I don't know where to go. I don't have GPS. I don't even have Google. What do? I freak out because I'm far away from my hotel and I don't know how to get back. That's a problem. But here's the other thing. You can go wherever you want to go. You'll never be far from God. So no matter where you go, and even if you think you're completely lost, it's okay. It's okay because God's right there. So all you need to do is just open your mind. That's it, which is a big blessing. That means you can access God at every moment of your life because God is actually accessing you every moment of your life. Because if God forbid God was not accessing you, you'd be gone. Everything exists because it's inside Ratzon Hashem. It's inside the will of God. That's why things exist. So therefore, in Kabbalah, people can be reincarnated even in the form of a rock, because rocks also have life, because everything has life, because it comes from the source of all life, which is God. How the life is manifest is different. Trees have xylem and phloem, man have respiratory systems, and so on. But that's the how things exist. The why things exist is because God wills it to exist. So God is right there for you. All you need to do is to return. Actually, I'll tell you like this. One of the famous Hasidic Rebbes was known as the Belzer Rebbe. And the Belzer Rebbe once asked, because it says that the non-religious Jews are as far away from God as east is to west. Now, on a superficial hearing of that, well, east is over here and west is all the way over there. It's pretty far. But watch this. This person's facing east and now he's facing west. That's it. That's all it is. Just to be able to turn around. What can help you turn around is Torah. The more Torah, or the more light of the Torah you have, the more you will understand and see who you are and where you can go. The expression of us in this world of Torah, which makes us greater than angels, is the ability to do a mitzvah. When we came to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, we had a secret that was given to us. It was called Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and then we will hear, right? Most people will say, well, I don't know. Let me hear about it and then I'll tell you if I'll do it. But the Jews said, no. We're going to do it. If it's from God, it's good. We're going to do it. We're on. Now tell me, what are we doing? They said, Na'aseh, first we will do, v'nishma, and then we will hear. Now I'll tell you something on a very deep Torah level. There's a very strange Gemara that explains some of the psukim, some of the verses in the Bible, in the Torah. It says as follows, that when God came to give the Torah to the Jews, he actually didn't come to the Jews first. He went over to the children of Esav, which we call the Roman Empire, the Western world. And he also came over to the Ishmaelim, to the Muslim world, to the Arab world. And both of them said, we can't take the Torah. And when they said that, God then said to the Jews, would you like it? And the Jews said, yep, Na'aseh v'nishma. Now, in a very simple children level of learning Judaism, we can make a horrible mistake in learning this Gemara. We can think, ha. Look at those Ishmaelim. Look at those Esavian. How primitive, how stupid they were that they blew the opportunity to come close to God. That's a very, very wrong way to look at this. In fact, not only were they not stupid, they were honest. They were honest. Esav said, my father Yitzchak blessed me to live by the sword. I am a warrior. And we see the Western world, the Romans, to this day, United States Marine Corps, Semper Fi, they're warriors. They live by the sword. That's what they're about. They knew who they were. So they knew that when God says, don't murder, I can't do it. It's not who I am. When God said to Ishmael, Ishmael says, well, I don't know. I have this uncontrollable desire for the physical world. I don't think I can be a holy person like this if I take the Torah. He was honest. He was honest. And when the Jews said, yeah, we can do this, they were also honest because we can do it. So guess what? Our brothers, Ishmael and Esav, came over to the Jewish people and they said, we are going to give you the secret of how to receive the Torah. Can you imagine this? That because of Esav and Ishmael, we actually got the Torah. They gifted us something, a tool to open up a door to get the Torah. How do you see that? Well, the name Esav is from the same word as aseh, to do. Naaseh, we will do. The emperor of the Roman Empire, these are builders, these are doers. We will show you how to be a doer. And the Ishmaelim are very, very sensitive and refined people when they are in their positive state of being. And we see this. We see periods in the history of the world where the Ishmaelim brought incredible science and wisdom into the world, poetry and music, unbelievable art. Unfortunately, today, many of them are not as connected to their holiness as they could be. But they have a higher power. They have the power to hear, right? That's our power also. Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. But they are Ishmael. They are, what does Ishmael mean? That God heard his prayers. God didn't say that about Yaakov. God said it about Ishmael. So Ishmael gave the Jews the power to hear. These are the two secrets of getting the Torah. Naaseh, we will do, was a gift from Esav. We will hear was a gift from Ishmael. That means what? That means our responsibility of the Jewish people is to be able to rectify the entire world. That you can never see another people or another religion as the enemy. If you see them as, they may be an enemy that you have to fight, that's for sure. But that's a sad thing. And while you're fighting them and you fight to kill, but nonetheless in the evening you pray that they come around. That's what you do. You don't want to kill them. You don't want to fight them. You'll do everything you can for peace. But if you go to war, kill them before they wake up in the morning. That's the Jewish way. Kill them before they wake up. But do everything to avoid going to war. And while you're at war, pray that their holiness should wake them up into how stupid it is that they're fighting with you. Because the whole world was created by one God. There isn't one God who created Africans and one God who created Asians and another one that created redheads. Oh, I used to be redhead. Once upon a time, redheads. There's only one God. There's only one God. And God creates all of us. So then we have to understand, how do we fit into the world? How are we able to bring that reality into our lives? So the Talmud says the way to do it is to do tshuva the day before you die. Because at the moment when somebody is dying, it's heavy. You know, as I said, my mother just passed away 2 weeks ago. And I had the opportunity to actually be holding her head as she took her last breath. And the last words out of my mother's mouth were the words, "Thank you." It was like an amazing, I felt this big, maybe that big might be more appropriate. I felt clearly I was in a room where the room was crowded with angels, and that there was something very, very holy was going on. And the angels had come as emissaries of God to collect what is God's, our souls. It was being returned to her Creator. And when a person sees that, when I saw something like that, it's not bad. Okay, it's sad. I miss my mom, that's for sure. But it's not bad. It's life. when we realize that we will someday also be like that, we will be in our last moment of our life, and then that's the point where all the things that we think are so important are absolutely worthless. It's so important that people honor me in my synagogue. It's so important that people should know I'm a Torah scholar. It's so important that I have a lot of money, or it's so important I have a fancy car. It's worthless. It's worthless. And when a person comes close to death, they realize that these things have no flavor. They have no taste. What has taste? Mitzvot. Doing the mitzvot, doing the commandments. And the more that you realize that these commandments are pipes from this world to the heavenly world, everything else becomes unimportant. You know, there was a story of a great rabbi of the last generation. He was known as the Chafetz Chaim, lived in Rotterdam in Europe. He was maybe the #1 rabbi in the world, but he had no money. And one day, a very wealthy American, I guess by those days they came by boat, came and he wanted to see the great rabbi, the Chafetz Chaim. And so he comes to the rabbi's house. He can't believe what he sees. He says the rabbi's table only has 3 legs. The paint on the wall is sort of chipping off. And so the man says to the rabbi, says, Rabbi, where is your nice table? Where is your, paintings on your wall? Where are all these things that life is what it's all about? So the rabbi said to the man, he said, tell me, sir, do you have a beautiful table back in your house in New York? Yeah, huge. I can put 20 people at my table. He says, okay, and do you have beautiful paintings on your wall? Some of my paintings are collector items. So the rabbi says, and so where are they? I don't see them. So the guy says, well, I'm not in my home. So the Chafetz Chaim says, guess what? I'm also not in my home. My home is the next world. I'm just visiting here. Could you imagine you go over to a bus stop, and while you're waiting for a bus, there's somebody putting wallpaper up on the bus stop, and he's moving in a little refrigerator, and he puts a little solar panel up on top so you can have TV. He said, what are you doing? He says, I'm getting comfortable. But this is only a bus stop. In a few minutes, the bus is going to come along. You're going to leave. This earth is a bus stop. It's a gift from God. It's a chance to be blind. It's a chance to be deaf. It's a chance to be mute. Meaning what? That all the things that we see and we hear and we speak in this world, if we can become blind to the shallow, meaningless things of this world, and to be able to see through these things and see the sparks of holiness in everything, and know how to capture these sparks and how to free these sparks to go back to their original source, you can do this. This is not make-believe. This isn't a video game. This is real life. And you have the 10 sefirot on your hands to be able to touch all the dimensions. Hamotzi lecha min haaretz, to take the bread out of the world. When you make that blessing, there is a mitzvah to put both hands on the bread. Why? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. The blessing has 10 words. You take the 10 sefirot, you take all of creation, you put your hand on bread, which is the food unique to human beings. I'm sure you never went outside and saw goats getting together and baking challah, right? Bread is human food. It represents wisdom. It comes out of the eretz, out of the world, and it's elevated through your blessing and made holy. That's what you are doing. In everything in this world, That's what you are doing. So let's talk a little bit more about dying per se. It's interesting, by the way, in English, we say to die. Now, die is a Hebrew word. It means enough, right? We sing on Passover, die, dayenu, die, dayenu. It means it is enough. So in a certain way, dying in a certain way means, okay, it was enough. In fact, coming back to the mystical city of Luz, where people never died, that we spoke about before, there it says that people got sick of living. They just couldn't handle living anymore. So they would actually leave the city, and death would be a great relief. There's an amazing story of one of the famous names in the Talmud known as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The angel of death, you can find this in the end of the 7th chapter in the Gemara in Ketubot if you want to look at it later. The angel of death comes over to him and says, you know, you're going to be dying soon. So the rabbi says, okay, listen, I have a request. How about you take me to the next world and let me see what am I going to be like in the next world? What will I be living in the next world? So the angel agrees. So the story is the little rabbi and the big angel of death are walking together on their way to heaven. And the rabbi says to the angel, you know what? That's an awfully wicked looking sword that you've got there, Mr. Angel of Death. Somebody could get really hurt with that. I have an idea. How about, to avoid any kind of an accident, I'll carry the knife. I'll carry the knife. Don't worry, it's right here, right? So the angel of death gives the rabbi the knife. So now the rabbi's got the angel of death's sword, and the two of them come to the heaven, but there's a wall. So the rabbi says, I can't see over the wall. So the angel puts his hands together like this. The rabbi puts his foot on the hand so he can come up and he can look over the wall. But while he's up there, he dives into the next world with a sword of the angel of death. But the angel of death is phenomenally fast and grabs the rabbi by his ankle. So the rabbi is now hanging upside down in the next world, but he's got the sword. And the angel's trying to grab the sword back. Anyhow, long story short, God gets involved. And God says, you know what? If this rabbi ever made a vow and he did not keep it, he has to give back the sword. But bad news, he kept all of his vows. So then God had to say, you got to give him back the sword. And the rabbi said, why? He said, because there are many people who need to die. They are in too much pain. They are in too much suffering. And they need to be free from their body. And so the rabbi gave back the sword. By the way, that's where we're going to go with this in the class. But I need to tell you this so that you will know the difference between when Jews learn Torah and when other people talk about whatever they talk about. Because I'm going to tell you something that, in my opinion, just shows you how freaking brilliant, creative, and funny the rabbis were in the Talmud. Because the very next story after that, unfortunately I can't think of the rabbi's name right now, was another rabbi. And the angel of death comes over. Same story. And the rabbi says, I don't want to see where I'm going to go. And the two of them go walking. And the rabbi says the same thing. He says, excuse me, Mr. Death, sir, but that's a really wicked looking blade you got there. How about I hold it? And the angel says, you think I'm an idiot? I'm going to make the same mistake twice? And that's the end of the Gemara. Okay, so that's just the beauty of how the Talmud talks in very real and very human terms. But the question is, what does it mean, this reality of the next world? So there's a phenomenal, strange Gemara, which you can find in the People's Talmud, and that says as follows. Everybody says, well, have you ever met anybody who died and came back to life and told you about it? Gemara says, yeah, I'll tell you exactly who it was. It was the son of Rabbi Yehuda. I think it was Rabbi Yehuda. So I could be wrong on the name. His son died and miraculously came back to life. And so the first thing his father does, obviously besides being very happy that his son came back to life, the first thing the father says is, wow, what was it like over there? And the rabbi says, all the people in this world that were stepped on, that were considered insignificant, unimportant, all those people, those are the people who are way up high in heaven. Because those are the people that God appreciates what they had to go through and loves them. And all those people with the fancy cars and the 5 homes and the this and the that, and they were taking advantage of other people just to make their empire and make themselves powerful, they're really, really low down. Okay, nice story. But here's the amazing part of the story, is the next part. The rabbi then says to his son, he says, tell us, what were we like in the next world? Okay? What were we like in the next world? Now, think about this for a minute. What does that mean? What were we like in the next world? We're not in the next world. We're still in this world. So what does it mean? What is it like to be in the next world? What was that all about? And yet the son answered his father. And we're going to explain this in a minute. He said, we were in the next world like we are in this world. Now, the problem with using the next world as a term of next world is it makes it sound like something that comes after something, which it does. But that's not all it is. The next world is also in the here and now. The only thing you can ever have and be is you now. Everything you have done in your entire life has only brought you to this Zoom call, because you are the sum total of everything that you have done. And here you are. This is why it is so important in life not to allow your past to steal your future. How many times do we go through really bad, difficult things in our lives, and we suffer from that the rest of our lives? We then walk through our lives backwards instead of turning around and realizing that we have a whole future ahead of us. We simply walk away from the pain of our past and we never live. The only thing you have here is the here and now. So therefore, that world of the next world is actually also here and now. And the reality of how we will be when we will be there is who we are here now. That's what the son said to him. We are in the next world like we are here, because the way that we will be forever is how we are here. Okay, the next point I want to touch on is a very strange piece of Talmud. It's found at the end, or forget that. It's found in the Gemara in Tainus. I don't remember right now exactly the place. But the Gemara says there that our father, Jacob, never died. Yaakov lo met, the Gemara says. Now that's really bizarre, because all you need to do is open up the Torah, the Bible, and you will see right there, you don't even need a commentary to explain it to you. It says Jacob died, Jacob was embalmed. You know, they were in Egypt where they used to make mummies, right? And he was then, a whole caravan came up to Israel, to the city of Hebron, and he was buried. That sounds pretty dead. I mean, right? That sounds pretty dead. Imagine not being dead and then being put into a mummy. Right? Actually, there's a cute joke like that. I hope it'll make its way from Israel to Africa. But the joke is, there was a rabbi and a priest and a mufti, and they're all being asked, what would you like your community to say about you on the day you die? So the mufti said, I want my community to say that I took care of them. I made schools for them. I found hospitals for them. I did whatever I could for them. And then they said to the priest, and what would you like your community to say on the day that you die? He said, well, I would like them to say I was a good shepherd. I led them to a holy place. I helped them to connect to God. Fine. And then they say to the rabbi, and what would you like them to say on the day of your death? He says, I'd like them to say, look, he's still moving. He's not dead. Okay, never mind. It was a bad joke. But anyhow, so the point is that on that moment when Yaakov died, how could the Talmud turn around and say he didn't die? So I'm going to share with you two answers I've heard. One is from a great scholar of many years ago known as the Maharal from a city called Prague in Europe. And he said like this, imagine one day you wake up, obviously at 120 years, you wake up and you get out of bed and you go over to the door or tent or whatever you have there. And as you go to open the door, your hand goes right through the door. You know, whoa, that's weird. So you try it again, and the hand goes right through the door. Gee, I never did that before. Every time I put my hand to the door, I open the door. But now I'm putting my hand to the door, and it's going through the door. And then all of a sudden, you look back over at your bed, and there you are. There's your body lying in the bed. But your soul has come out of your body. This is why, by the way, in the Jewish tradition, when a person dies, the first thing that happens is that the soul freaks out, right? I would imagine it would freak out, right? All of a sudden you're outside of your body. That's pretty freaky. So it pops out of the body, and it's very, very frightened. And the first thing it does is it goes home, hoping that maybe this is just a bad dream and we will wake up from the bad dream. But when they get to the home, this is why in the Jewish tradition, in the house of a mourner, we cover the mirrors and we cover glass, anything that would be a reflection. Why? Why do we do that? The answer is because the soul will look in the mirror and not see himself. And that will cause the soul an even greater shock. So we try to make it easy. Then, in the house of the mourners, we're sitting on the floor, we've ripped our shirt, and we cry, and we talk about the person who we've lost. Because it comforts the soul. The soul doesn't feel alone in its pain of being dead. Imagine it comes home and everybody's drinking like the alcohol and wait a minute, I think he's got the gold over there, go break that, right? That's not going to make the person feel that much. Why, you lousy kids, right? So therefore, to comfort the soul, we mourn with the soul. So the Maharal explains that when it says that Yaakov didn't die, it means that the soul of Yaakov came out of his body like a hand coming out of a glove, or like an eyelash coming out of milk. Because his soul was so connected to God in this world in the most practical way that for him to leave his body, he already left his body. His soul was already with God. So there was no death. There was no pain. In contrast to that, a person who uses his soul as a slave to do the things that the body wants to do, then the soul is really stuck in the body. And when the body ceases to function, the soul is stuck. It can't get out. It tries to get out. It's like a thorn upside down, pulling through cotton, pulling and ripping and tearing and so on. That's our choice. It depends how we live. That's how we will be. That's why Yaakov never died, because his soul and his body was just like you are when you're in your car or you're on a motorcycle or you're on a bike. When you get to where you're going, you get out of the car. When the body has completed its job, you get out of the body. That's the process. But there's another way it was explained to me by the late Reb Simcha Wasserman of blessed memory. And he said, when you go out, and I'm sure in Africa it's really much more beautiful than I remember in New York, but when you go outside at night and you really see the stars, you look up at the heaven and you see the stars. The first thing to remember is that what you see is about that much of what's really there. The stars go way beyond anything that we can see. In fact, that's why our mystical sages tell us that there are 18,000 other planets out in the universe with intelligent life. It's insane and arrogant to think that God only made this one little planet, unless God wished to, of course. But that doesn't mean God had to. It could be endless or infinite, like God. Okay? So therefore, this is why we learn in mystical literature that holy souls actually travel to these other planets and engage with them. And when you learn Zohar, you will learn about what type of beings exist on the various planets, even in our solar system. But that's not really that important. What is actually important is to realize that when you go out and you look at these stars and you see what is there, most of the stars you are looking at are dead. Most of the stars that you see with your eyes have burned out millions and millions of years ago. But the light is continuing. So when you look at the light, you forget that that star no longer exists, because to you, you see the light. So that's the same thing by Yaakov. Yes, Yaakov died. Yes, Yaakov was embalmed. Yes, Yaakov was buried in Hebron. But the light that came out of him, it exists even to this moment in the Zoom call. Yaakov's light never died. So what about your light? What about your light? What do you want to do with your light while you're alive? What do you want to do? That's the good and that's the bad. Because the bad is God's not going to bother you. God will help you here and there, but God is hiding like your shadow, as David HaMelech, King David said. King David says to God, "You are my shadow." Really? Really? You're my shadow? Really? The God that creates everything? The infinity? We can't even understand Yud Ke Vav Ke. And that's not even really God's name. That's only the creation of the Zera Anpin. Well, we don't even know what that is. And then you want to move to a higher name of God, the name of who? Mem Yud, me? Da lifnei mi ata omed? Right? You want to move to that level? And then what goes after there? There's no name for God after there. That's called Ein Sof, without end. So that God, which is without end, is nothing but your shadow? How does that work? Especially King David would say something like that? Yeah, because King David is teaching us something amazing. That all the time we are on this ball field, we are on this playing park, God will be our shadow. In other words, God will say, you decide where do you want to go. You decide what will people say about your light after you leave this world. And when you go through that process of that revelation of what that's all about, then that means that you have deserved what you get because you made it. You created it. And therefore, that remains with you in a level which is forever. Okay, two last things. One is the Jewish idea of reincarnation. Now, many people, when they think about reincarnation, they think about the Hindus or the Druze or other societies where reincarnation is a very basic part of their religion. But actually, it's a very basic part of Jewish religion as well. In fact, I'm going to say another horrible joke that I have a feeling no one's going to get. I actually just saw that this morning. It was a picture of a building, and the front door said, "The Society for the Study of Reincarnation." And there was a man standing at the front door. I don't know if you have this so much in Africa, but in Israel we have them. In New York we have something which is called a welcome mat. It's like a mat. You put it in front of the front door, so if you have mud on your shoes, you can wipe off the mud before you come in. And usually it's written the word welcome, like welcome into my house. But this building, which was the study of reincarnation, on that mat, it said, "Welcome back." Okay, another lousy joke. All right, so how do we in Judaism know that there's a concept of reincarnation? The pivot point that it first comes into the world is the Zohar on one of the biblical chapters in Hebrew, which is called Mishpatim, but actually means judgments. And the Bible begins by saying, "Elu Mishpatim," these are the judgments. And so therefore, you could see that you don't see judgment. You don't see judgment. You don't see bad guys getting punished. You see bad guys becoming politicians. You don't see people who do bad things to other people go to jail. You see them become policemen. So where do you see justice? Where do you see the justice? So before I tell you the Zohar, I'll tell you another story from the gentleman I mentioned earlier, the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim explains reincarnation. Yeah, the Chafetz Chaim explains reincarnation the following way. He says, imagine you go as a guest to another Jewish community and you come into their synagogue on Shabbat. And you watch now when they're reading the Torah, you watch the way they call up various people to make a blessing on the Torah. And you're the guest and you turn to your friend and you say, this is really crazy. Look at how your rabbi or gabbai calls up these people. He points to that guy over there, and then he points to that one there, and then that one there. He says, why does he do such chaos? Why doesn't he go over to the first row, the first person, and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? And that would make sense. So his friend says to him, I'll tell you a little secret. The gentleman who's calling up the people to receive a blessing, I don't know if you can see, but he's got a little box with pages in it. And those people in those pages are all the people in our synagogue. And he's going through it in a very, very ordered manner. It just so happens that the next guy in his order is sitting over there. And then the next guy in perfect order is sitting over there. But it's in complete order. And then the host says to his friend, he says, the problem is you're only here for one Shabbat. But if you lived here, you would be able to see on every Shabbat, you would see how perfect the order is. So the Chafetz Chaim explains that that's our problem. We are only here in this world for one Shabbat. And so therefore, we don't see the perfect order. We see it as chaos. And that's why the Zohar translates the words Elu Mishpatim. It translates the words as Al Galgalehen. These are the reincarnations. Because only once a person can see all of time and space, all of the reincarnations as the Zohar talks about, then a person will be able to see Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, that God is the true judge. Everything is perfect. But when we are only here for one generation of life in this world, then we have that problem because we don't understand, we don't see, and therefore we can get lost in this world. But that's what we believe, that our reincarnations are things that we go through in order to be able to elevate ourselves. Okay, the last thing I wanted to share was the most important point, and that is as follows. The Rambam put together for us 13 basic principles of faith in God. And one of the 13 is, and each one of them begin in Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh, Ani Ma'amin B'Emunah Shlema. I believe with complete faith that the dead will come back to life. Not as a horror movie, not as the way they show it in fake wood or Hollywood, but rather as a phenomenally beautiful, beautiful moment in our future, where everybody who ever died will come back to life. And I want to tell you something. This is such basic Judaism, to believe it, that the dead will come back to life, that if you open a traditional Jewish prayer book, the crescendo, the highest moment of prayer, because the morning prayers basically fall into 4 components. The first component is like rock, the world of physical completely. The second component is the level of the animal. The third component is the level of the angels. And the fourth component is when there is nothing but you and God. And that is called in Hebrew the Shmona Esrei, the standing silent prayer of 18 Chai, blessings of life. You are alone with God. Think about that. Don't be alone with God and think about what you have to do in 25 minutes later, picking the kids up at school. You're alone with God. Well, how could you squander that opportunity? How? So you are alone with God and you are saying the prayer of the standing silent prayer. Do you know? And I'm going to say, you probably don't know, but that's okay. Because I would bet you if I had yeshiva guys on this call and I asked them, they also wouldn't know. And just do some math. If you pray the standing silent prayer 3 times a day like we as Jews do, and that means if you do 1 year of prayer, you're close to over 900 times you've said this prayer. If you've been praying for 10 years, you are over 9,000 times you've said the prayer. What have you said 9,000 times in your life that you don't know by heart? Okay? And despite that, I'm going to ask you a question. How many times in this 9,000 times that you have said this prayer, how many times in that prayer is written resurrection of the dead? How many times? Answer, 5. 5 times in your prayers you say resurrection of the dead. You don't talk about money or healing or any other prayer in the prayers as much as resurrection of the dead, because it's that fundamental. And if you really believe it, now believe it doesn't mean you understand it, but if you believe it, then you know when somebody dies, they don't really die. In fact, the Talmud says that you should not feel sorry for the dead because they are in a much better place. Rather, feel sorry for the mourners because they are the ones who are crying for what they have lost. But if you understand that the ones that you have lost will come back, it's a different relationship. It's still painful, it's still sad, and you still have to mourn, and you still have to go through the healing, but you know somewhere, somehow, in time, you will be back together with those people. That's a very beautiful thought. And you will be together in a much, much better place than we are now. but it will be a better place because of what we do now. Because now we are blessed with blindness. To be blind and not even being able to see God and to still serve God is way beyond any angel. Because every angel sees God. Whoop-de-doo. But to be down here in earth and not even know if there really is God, let alone see God, and still give your life to trying to open up that which reveals God, that makes you greater than the angels. And that brings us back to the beginning of the class, which is where we're going to have to stop now. That when you do that, when you go upstairs, it'll be just like we were talking about with the NFL. When you come running out of the locker room into the playing field of heaven, the angels will be lined up. Bam, 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 high five, high five, high five, high five. Because look who's here. Look who's here. Don't you want to be welcomed like that? Wouldn't it be nice to go upstairs and hear, look who's here? You can do it. It doesn't matter if the New York Times doesn't write about you. They don't read the New York Times upstairs. I'll leave you with this last mystical thought. Because in our classes, many times we've spoken about numerology, the letters and their values and so on. There's a term which is taken from the writing of the prophets, which we say twice actually in our prayers, and that is Rosh Gadol. And there will come from behind me a great noise. Now, out my window over here is the football or soccer stadium of Jerusalem, where the Maccabean soccer team plays. And at night when they play, if I have my window open, all I hear is 40,000 crazy Israelis going, whoa! And it's like a wind that comes right through our apartment. It's kind of wild, actually. But guess what? That's not what the prophet meant when he said a great noise, not Rosh Gadol. In fact, that sound might not even get all the way up to heaven, although maybe it will, because it's Israelis in Israel, so it's holy. However, the numerical value of the two words Rosh Gadol is 613. Because the only sound that makes a noise in heaven is when you are holy. When you do something, an act of kindness for somebody, you control your anger, you don't speak foul, you sneak, you know somebody's in a horrible financial situation, but instead of handing them money, which will make them feel horribly embarrassed, you sneak the money so there's no idea to know where the money came from. These are the things that make a loud noise in heaven. And that's it. That's our opportunity. Think of this as an immersive 3D virtual reality video game that we're living in. And instead of having to do things with your thumbs, you can do them with your hands. So every single second, bing, another mitzvah, another mitzvah, another mitzvah, another mitzvah. Bing, bang, 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 bing, bang, 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 bing, bang, 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 bang. That's it, man. Turn your life into a song to God. What else can you do? Really, what else can you do? That's it. That's what you can do. And do it while we are alive, because that's the gift from Hashem. So I love you all so much. It's really, I know it's been, you know, between surgery and corona and my mother's loss and all these other things. I know we haven't been sharing the time we should be, but I love you guys very much. And every time I see you, you mamish, you make me feel wonderful. So thank you so much for your time. And God willing, we will catch up again. Bye to everybody.
Bye, Ravi. Bye, Ravi.
Bye.
Really wonderful. Nice seeing you once again.
Yes. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
All right.
Bye.